Today we got a pretty cool little project, 2010 Mercedes C300 4MATIC. Guest states it has a vibration noise while driving. Well, they brought it in, I jumped in it, went and took it around the block, and I can tell you right away, it's not a wheel bearing, it's not a cup tire, it's not a bad U-joint. What we got here is a bad transfer case output bearing. So if you got something like this where it's just a very loud vibration noise and you've already done all your tests, shaking wheels and listening with a stethoscope to wheels and tires are in good shape, follow along and maybe this could help you out. So here we're under the car at the rear of the tranny, and the transfer case is actually built into the transmission. It's kind of hard to see in this video, but this is where our noise sounds like it's coming from. And there's two bearings on this output shaft, one in the back, one more forward, and then there's two in the front, one here and one in the front of that. So we're gonna try to take it apart in the car without pulling the transmission out. Seems like if we get these bolts out, we can get this half off, take apart what's inside of there, and then go for these outer bolts. Okay, so we unbolted the plastic covers on the side so that we could get at this heat shield bolts and push it back to get out of the way. And then we disconnected the drive line and slipped it down. First, we took this front half off. And then we need to get this out, but it's stuck. We take this snap ring out. And you can slide this out. And there's a bolt right there. Okay, so we took the bolt loose, and now we can slide this whole drum out. Get access to the bearings. Well, starting to get closer. So now we need to unbolt this part of the case. And here's one of the bearings that we're suspecting is bad. Okay, so we got all the bolts out from this half, and here we're getting to where the problem lies. So you take this off. Oh, that was part of it already. There we are. Missing some rollers though. Tore up. Whew. Oh, this one's got them. Oh, all beat up. See what the racers look like. So now we're gonna pull these out. Front output shaft one and this one, so we can get at the bearings on the opposite sides. Okay, so here we removed the rear output shaft and the front output shaft, and we already knew that the rear bearings were smoked, shown earlier. Looking at the fronts, not really see any issues with those. They're still gonna get replaced while we're there. So this one obviously came off of this side, and the front one connects actually to the front drive line right there. So it was kind of a job to get it pulled out of there. It was just a really tight fit, but two pry bars and walked it out. And then the next step was getting these races out, these inner races. It was a job. Just used a combination of different pry bars and hooked in there until, you know, finally could get them to pop out. And then there is a shim behind each race. I marked them all so I know where they went for setting the bearing preload. Also on this shaft, just so you know, in case you run into an issue, there is these two collars and shim. They just were sitting right on there. So same with this one. This race was actually a little easier to get off, so you could just chisel it out through the front drive shaft hole opening. And then the shim behind that as well. There is a U-joint actually right inside here. This one feels really good. I have seen ones where pick them up and dump them out and rust is just coming out, but ones like that, you can get a lot of slop just from twisting them. Okay, now before we clean all this up and get it ready to install and silicone our halves together and all that, just don't forget that this seal needs to be replaced now while the transfer case is split. It cannot be installed from the outside. It gets pushed in from the inside going forward. As you can see, if you look over here, it does not go in from this side. So now's the time to do that. Here's the back half of the transfer case. The bearings, front one rode here, the rear one rode there. The races and stuff need to be removed from these also. These were a lot easier. Just use something around this number. You know, got under there and just pried up, worked it around. So it came out. Same at the front. Has a shim for preload. Mark it. This one I actually, when it was together, just do it from this side. Just pounded it down. Clean up the silicone. Slap it in the parts washer. Okay, now we took the output shaft bearing races off, the inners. We just took a hammer and a chisel and set the chisel right on the inner race, and they just tapped off pretty easy. I mean, we already had them taking them off, but that's all we did. You can see how mangled this one is. That was the worst one. Here we got our 4 bearings and 4 bearing races, input shaft and output shaft seal. Got them online from a website, fcpeuro.com. I'll put the link in the description. They had the best price, really fast shipping, all factory parts. So if you're doing this job, check them out. So then we split the old race in half so we could use it as a driver and it wouldn't get pounded back on. Put the new bearing on where it goes with some lube. Set it on top, and we just tapped it down until the sound changed. So we'll do that for the other 3. And then we'll work on the inners. Okay, so we got our 4 bearings pressed on and our 4 races put back in with the correct shims underneath each race on the cover and in the back of the transmission. We also put that new seal in so that we didn't forget. So we'll get these output shafts put back in, and then we'll start to get some silicone on the case halves and bolt it back together. Okay, so we got this half siliconed up and ready to put on, and our output shafts installed. Just want to make sure the surface is clean and free of oil. Use a little isopropyl on a rag. Make sure nothing gets in between your silicone. And we will get that on and check back in. Okay, we got that case installed back on there and torqued to spec. Our silicone pushed out nicely all the way along. Now we're gonna slide this drum back in. And don't forget to get that bolt in there and tighten that up. And then you can put your this part back on with the snap ring. So after that, we'll check back in when we're installing the end of the case. Okay, the back case is on. We got our hub on, bolt torqued, and that about wraps up that. Next, we're just gonna put the driveline back on and get them black plastic shields and stuff in. And then we'll move on to servicing the transmission. Okay, so the driveline and the heat shields are back in. I actually decided to change the tranny fluid now before putting the mount and stuff back on just because we had a little more room. So we pulled the drain plug, let that run out, and then being the overflow style, we just loosened the pan, let all the excess drain out the corner. Just had these little 6 of these bolts around the edges, these little holders. Pull the pan off, hook the filter with it, bring her down. And that's that. We'll get this cleaned up, get the new filter put in, pan back installed. Then we'll show you how to set the fluid level. Okay, we got the pan all cleaned up. And I'm just going to stop and show you this kit I got, which I also got from the same place as the bearings, fcpeuro.com. It came with a new filter, 6 new bolts to hold the pan on, copper gasket for the drain plug, a new overflow tube, and the gasket along with 7 quarts of the factory specified fluid. Overflow plug just snaps in right where the drain plug went. We got our gasket on. We lubed up the filter O-ring. You just take the filter, push it up into place. Then we can proceed to put the pan back on. Okay, so we got our tranny pan back on. Everything's sealed up. Now we're going to fill the transmission. We got this tool online, part number 7415. It's just a fill adapter for the overflow transmission. So you'll thread it in there. And then I didn't have a fancy fluid pump thing, so I just made this one up. I just took the spray bottle, tapped in a valve stem so I can hook the air chuck up to it. I just dumped about a gallon of the tranny fluid right into here. Put this on with a zip tie. And we'll start filling. So now for this initial fill, we're just gonna fill it until it runs out, and then we'll have to start the vehicle and add some more. Bear with me, I don't know how long this is gonna take. Oh, it is already. We are already running out, which is good. Gonna let some of that extra drain back in. Okay, so now we have the car running. We refilled our fluid pump, scan tool hooked up. We're looking at the oil temperature. We pull this now, nothing's gonna come out. We can hook the pump back up. And we're gonna wait for it to get a little warmer, and then we'll probably add until it starts dripping back out. And then we'll just wait until it gets up to temperature. And at 113, we should have a nice steady drip. Okay, so the fluid's still very cold. I did add about 4 more quarts, 3 maybe. We're at about 6 now, and it's just leaking out. So for the rest, we're just gonna wait for it to get up to temperature. And we're getting right to 113 degrees on our oil temp. Just pull this plug and we should have a little fluid come out. Perfect. Now we'll shut her down and put the drain plug back in. Okay, now fluid's in, set. Everything's back together. We can let her down and go for a test drive. Now I lifted the car up from the front just to let the transmission fluid run to the back and hopefully get on the transfer case bearings before we take it for a spin. And here we are, nice and quiet again, back to normal. Thanks for following along.